All right, I'm not an AMGA guide.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really fun to actually thank you. It's actually really, really fun to be up here amidst all these peers of mine that I've respected and look up to, you know, even though I'm probably older than most of you. My name's Brenda Hollon, and I'm here to offer up my perspective. I'm an assistant, AMGA assistant ski guide and area course leader. And I still have just one more program. I got to get that ski exam out of the way, and then I'll finally get that certification. So I'm still right in the thick of it. I'm a little bit older. A long time ago, I was actually at RMI, probably around the same time as you, Spencer. And so I put in a stint working for RMI and then IMG. And back then, a person could just call themselves a guide by throwing on a baseball cap. If you've heard that joke, right? And now it's so different. You need to go through some certifications. You actually need to have some experience before even getting hired on to these services. So it's just a very different landscape now than it was when I first started. I actually really appreciate it now. I like having some structure and some standards and certifications to strive for and follow through and kind of know where we're all at. I am a parent as well. I have 2 daughters. And back in the day when I was guiding, when I switched and became a mom, it was actually really difficult to continue working in the industry. And so my path is just a little bit different, being female, mom, and a little bit older. The environment was different. There weren't as many pathways or maybe as many people who are welcoming to having folks work more part-time. And so I took a break from that, and I filled up my time doing a few other things. And so I would say that if you find yourself in the same boat, that you actually need to step away for a little bit, no matter what your gender is, maybe use that time to continue working on certain skills. If you're a rock climber who doesn't really ski, but you eventually want to go down that path, perhaps while your kids are young, that's when you can actually go nail down the skiing or the split-boarding. So use your time in ways that can, if you choose to go back into guiding a little bit later, like me, you'll won't have lost a lot of traction. Okay? A little bit more about me, since I'm probably new to most of you. I recognize a lot of folks, but not the majority. I use she, her pronouns. I identify as Korean and white. I grew up in West Germany. And like I said, I worked for RMI and IMG, and then I took a step away and I went and got a meeting in sustainable business. And then I came back to guiding, going through the ski track and the AIARE tracks. And then I've also worked for many of you guys out here, like Top Adventures, Mountain Bureau, CHE, the Mountain Madness, Northwest Mountain School. You probably don't even know, but I worked for you once. Todd. And it was usually on the women in the BIPOC programs. And I really enjoyed getting to know the different services. I liked getting to see the different cultures and flavors, and that's why I know a lot of you guys. Let's see, a little bit more is I also helped launch Climbers Colors Avalanche program, and I served on NWAC's DEI committee, and then I've contributed to some other nonprofits out there like Open Slopes. I got a diversity and inclusion certificate, and I run a small business called Verascapes. And so what I thought I would bring here today is share with you how I think an aspect something that gets hidden a lot, but if we can tap into it, we can actually use it to enhance our guiding sustainability for leaders. And you might be surprised or not surprised to hear me say that. I think it's adding inclusion, increasing inclusion into our work. Okay. So what do I mean by that? All right, inclusion. Drawing from Dr. Nishi at Cornell and John Powell at the Othering and Belonging Institute at UC Berkeley. Inclusion is the belief that all people and all perspectives matter. When applied to guides, we can think of it as all guides and aspiring guides matter, and no subgroup should be prevented from contributing and benefiting fully. Inclusion means more than diversity. If diversity is who's in the room, then inclusion is how are people treated once they're in there. And then ultimately it's about belonging, access, opportunity, and voice. Let's see. For us guides, inclusion means no one's success depends solely on who one already knows what they look like and how much they can afford to invest in training. Those are all things that I struggle with. All right, so why does inclusion matter? It's because when work environments are inclusive, teams have the potential to foster innovation, increase collaboration, improve risk management, experience higher levels of trust and cohesion, and have lower levels of conflict, tap into broader ranges of perspectives and knowledge. When inclusion levels are low or exclusion is high, teams might be unstable, increases in disengagement, conflict, and experience lower levels of info sharing, trust, and performance. I'm imagining that while I've said those words, that you might have been thinking of experiences that you've had yourself around those lines. Well, full inclusion is aspirational, right? The reality is that we work in places that have varying degrees of inclusion. We should strive for it because it impacts our physical and mental health, our job satisfaction, and our financial security. And then we're all well aware here in our industry that in the guiding industry, we're predominantly white heterosexual males, and yet we're seeing increasing participation from other races, sexes, and genders. I think it's important to increase diversity in our profession, and I know many of you also feel the same way. According to the American Census Bureau, in 2011, the majority of U.S. births, babies, was from minorities. Those kids are going to be 18 years old in 4 years. They're going to be adults who are going to be going potentially on our programs. And around 2044, the U.S. is expected to have a majority minority. So the population is diversifying, and we as guides need to be prepared to guide them at risk of becoming obsolete. Back in the day, when I was taking that break from guiding, I went to grad school, as an older adult, non-traditional student, and my team wrote a paper on the national park visitation. And back then, the national park was concerned that their majority user group of white men was aging out. So they had to start looking for ways to draw new populations of people into the parks. And also around then, the Mountaineers here, they had a new CEO, a woman who was tasked to increase their membership because similarly, they had an aging out population. And so we have these big institutions that have already been thinking about this diversification, and they've already been working and have seen success. So we can learn from them and do that as well. I also just want to bring this into our guiding world. Not too long ago, maybe it was about 3 years ago, a guide came to me and he was really distressed. He needed someone to talk to. He had an incident on one of our local mountains, and he had been accused of discriminating this particular client, a woman, and it just happened to be that because of my work at Verascapes, that client, the woman, was directed to call me to get some advice. So I ended up hearing both sides without them even knowing this was happening. And it was just really unfortunate because both people were super amazing folks, and there was a misunderstanding, but it was a grievous one. It really hurt both of them. what ended up happening is this client communicated to the guide service owner, and in response got a very scathing, derogatory email, which made this client feel even worse. And it was, for me, it was embarrassing to see that kind of response. Well, a little bit of time passes, and I end up helping to facilitate a repair between the guide and the client. And it didn't take much, right? It's just mostly actually talking things through and seeing each other's perspective. And because of that, they were able to drop a lot of the stress and be able to move on with their lives. So I share this because this is why it matters. This is why we need to be prepared to work with different populations in our work. We want to prevent those things from happening. Oh, okay. So as a reminder, inclusion extends to categories beyond race, sex, and gender. Okay, so some work situations where inclusive practices would be helpful are when we've got an East Coast guide coming out to the Pacific Northwest, a person or a guide with dyslexia working with neurotypical guides. We've got a new rock climber who's in a program with all big wall climbers, or maybe we've got a slope boarder who is only with skiers, right? You can picture the differences there that we're going to need to be capable of managing.
Okay, well, slope board, that's where I draw them. Whoa. Don't go there, Martin.
All right, so how do we build inclusion? We start with how we relate to each other, okay? And I suggest that we do that by becoming the friender, mentor, or the sponsor. All right, so why friendship, mentorship, and sponsorship? Inclusion is a relational construct. It's ultimately about how our guide teams function and perform based on our quality of social connections, openness to learning, agility, and depth of decision making. That all comes down to how well we connect with each other, especially with those who are outside of our immediate circle. When we connect, we break down assumptions and create pathways for learning and relationship building. So that we're all on the same page, let me share how I define friendship, mentorship, and sponsorship. Kind of obvious, but friendship is peer-to-peer. We have supportive relationships, often informal, grounded in trust. And they can be especially helpful for folks who are new to the industry, like say underrepresented guides. Mentorship is guidance and skill development from a more experienced person. You can picture that. Creates transfer of knowledge and values, and it is two-way. Mentees have perspectives that they can bring to the mentors. And then sponsorship is like public advocacy. It's when a person uses their influence and power and their reputation to open doors for other people. Maybe someone like Spitzer, who actually hires folks. He can open a lot of doors just by talking to somebody. And then sponsorship expands who gets seen, hired, or invited. I know a lot of you already do this. I see some of my mentors here actually already in the room. We ski, climb, share things with our peers. But what I want to ask for us to do is to go next level. So I'd like us to think about creating relationships with folks who are a little bit outside of our immediate circle, because that's where we're going to actually bridge, make a connection to someone who might be able to offer us a new perspective and us them. When we connect with our friends and people who are within that circle, there's a term that's just called bonding. But when connecting with folks who are outside our immediate circle, we tend to use the word bridge. All right, so I've got a breakout activity for us, and I'd like you to pair up or be in groups of 3, but just kind of get in little huddles, introduce yourselves if you don't know who each other are, and then I'd like you to share, each of you share an experience that you've had with apprenticeship, mentorship, or sponsorship, and then note whether it was a bonding event or a bridging event, and what made it successful. Try to figure that out. What role did you have? Say, were you the mentee or were you the mentor? And what might have you gained from that experience? And then when your group is done, one of you come up and actually just write a few notes on here. I'll have a apprenticeship, mentorship, and sponsorship paper. And then we'll regroup and we'll just kind of scan those. Okay. All right, I'll give you a few minutes. Go.
Haley, I was good to you. I feel like I'm sidetracked. Yeah, no, like so fast. People do it today. Yeah.
So what we're gonna do instead is let's have a share out. So instead of using a visual aid of what's come up for you, let's just hear from each group directly. Okay. You can just share what's resonated, what's come up, the questions you've had, the successes, however you want to answer it, it all works. Let's start with you, Reed.
For us, the outdoors, not climbing specifically, but it was the first time we're around a much more diverse group of people, and not even so much in the we're all on mountains, we're all being out there, but this person's background could be so vastly different from ours. Tell me about that. I have never experienced that. Sorry, I grew up in a barn. So tell me about your experience. And that was something that in other aspects of my life wouldn't happen. Everyone's kind of on the same, either at least socioeconomical class or look exactly like me. And so that was a thing that has been. I have a more diverse friend circles in the last 15 years of living out here. Otherwise.
All right, we'll just open up the floor. Anybody who feels they want to add on or start anew. Ian, something.
Well, we talked about how mentorship. I'm sure it's not exclusive to guiding, but how mentorship and guiding is so critical. Even you cannot learn to guide. I mean, even teaching from the AMGA, you can't learn to guide solely from taking an AMGA course. We talked about it. If you just had the financial backing to start a guide service with no guiding experience, zero, it would be virtually impossible to do a reasonably good job. Sure, you could get people to sign up, make a great website, whatever. You could advertise social media, but you have a really hard time actually guiding. And so how important it is to just have good mentorship for everyone and to recognize clearly there's never an end to where you can be mentored, but just recognize you go through different stages of your career where you're early in your career, you're more you're being mentored much more heavily. It's not that you're not helping your coworker or someone other guide randomly, but there's a natural arc, almost like some of Martin's awesome graphics that he had, natural arc to your mentorship where you tend to do more menteeing and tend to do more mentorship, though obviously it's not exclusive, but.
Thanks.
I just shared that in a mentorship context. I found it really helpful to I think we all have our goals and objectives when we go out and do something, and how ideally we would like to spend the time. But if we're mentoring other people, it's important to make at least one of the objectives their learning and them gaining some skills, because those two things can come into conflict. They're not up for the thing that I want to do, or they can't ski the thing that I want to ski. So I just shared an experience I had where it was really helpful for me to make the whole focus of the day just other people and helping them learn, as opposed to what I wanted to do. And it was rewarding, kind of like how Ian was talking about, helping people to achieve this thing that they've been dreaming about, even if it's routine for him.
Having clear parameters and getting it very explicit will help.
I think on the mentorship, that's where I've seen the industry mature a lot on specifying mentorship. It seems to be a pretty trendy buzzword the last 5 years. But we've always been getting it or giving it organically without realizing it, but it's way more productive and constructive when there's a clear communication between the two that this is happening.
Yeah.
Right now, I think that's just been more organically through both people. And even I've had it where sometimes I'm in the position I'm both at the same time because the group flourishment, right? But able to communicate that has, I think, brought a lot of benefit to both sides.
From my perspective, I remember restarting with the AMGA years ago and hearing the message, get a mentor, get a mentor, get a mentor. And then I tried to get a mentor and it was really hard and difficult and basically failed at it. And then I ended up figuring out how to actually make that work. And it's not just like one singular person who ends up bestowing all of their amazing grace on me. Instead, I had to get a little moment of mentorship here and a little bit there. And then eventually, the environment kind of shifted. Like you said, there was more people willing to share. Even with this type of event that's happening tonight, we're seeing more of these things. And so now there's just more opportunities to actually interact with others. So it's, from my perspective, it's a little bit different to wanting that it's changed. What do you guys?
No pressure.
What does successful relationships look like? Sponsorship?
I feel like some of the stuff, we're talking about mentors for us and how even just a little bit of mentorship, whether it's from an employer, coworker, friend, can definitely shape how we see ourselves and how we work.
I think one thing that was brought up in our group was sort of how do you know when you become a mentor? Like, how do you identify yourself as someone who can fulfill that role? Because you can jump in early and think you're helping, that's sort of friendship, but the idea of like someone who actually has someone who's receiving more questions, that people are coming to them for answers, it's like that. I think that transition is not easy to identify. Especially, but when you are in these roles where you manage groups of people, that is a position where you start to see that your relationship is no longer peer to peer. You're offering something to people, and how you do that would make a solid relationship or make it really hard for other people.
Yeah. Well, the floor is open. Still, if anybody wants to just report out from their group. So, let's see. A lot of folks here probably already do some amount of these mentorship, and sponsorship things. Like you're a business owner and you encourage folks to go train with each other, go climbing together, go skiing together, or you host a sled rescue day. So there's some amount of training that goes on, but that's a little bit different from just straight up mentoring and mentoring. Mentoring we are defining it as someone out of the pair or the group has a little bit more skill or experience, and there was someone who would benefit from that. And then mentoring is definitely a little bit less big of a gap in that skill share, but they don't need to be equals, of course. There's going to be a skill share and experience share going on here. And one thing that it sounds to me, just based on walking around, that it sounds like most of those relationships were probably bonding. You knew the other person, There was some question about whether some of these interactions were actually bridging. When it comes to inclusion, I just encourage us, in order to diversify our skills in this way, is to reach out to someone who's just a little bit outside the circle. Make that first step. It doesn't have to be way far out of your circle, but just embrace a little bit of discomfort and put yourself into one of these roles so that you, of course, build your skills, but also that you gain that perspective from someone that you don't normally run into all the time. Let's see, anything else? What else? Anything? I'm about to move on. Is there anything else that's come up for folks?
I think. Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty apparent that like obviously there's a lot of mentorship, a lot of friendship, but sponsorship is something that like you don't see as much
Yeah.
in the other industry or maybe any industry. But and I think yeah, whatever that looks like, I mean, there's many reasons why that's more challenging, whether it's financial barriers or cultural or whatever that is, but yeah, and I think so much of the outdoor industry is like we even in guiding, a lot of the stuff we do is if you're ski guiding and you're skiing good snow, like we're used to kind of like having fun doing what we're doing. And sometimes we try and cater the trip that's less sexy, or say maybe that's a type of sponsorship maybe in some way. Like, this was my baker, that would be like the greatest thing. They're still paying for it. But there's this, I don't know. There's like it's like you're kind of like giving up more to do a sponsorship. And it's not just about imparting knowledge. It's like about that, like bridging that gap, which is something that's we don't do as much in the industry. And maybe sometimes we think we are, but we have mentorship and mentorship.
Oh, I think what's cool is, I'm more mature than you guys. No, but like, this little arc that I drew, I actually I'm enjoying now coming into a phase of my guiding life where I'm going to be mentored by people that I have mentored. Because they're sort of like this, sort of like when you're sort of like in the me. That's maybe like in a more academic world would maybe be called sort of like the fractional intelligence, is sort of like you're at the height of your technical prowess and all that stuff, and then over time what you have to offer is maybe a little bit more what hopefully like has the the experience and wisdom about like how stuff works. But Ben actually like pointed this out to me. This was years ago. Sort of said it's like these skills, these hard skills. It's a perishable skill. Your obviously your physical prowess it will go down, but also sort of like your technical know-how. It's perishable, and maybe even if you know it as well as you used to, maybe there's newer, better ways to do things, and now I will be, looking forward to being taught by people who I taught. So it's kind of a cool, can be sort of almost like circular.
For my example of sponsorship is just Eddie inviting me onto this panel. So I appreciate you seeing me and inviting me to share my voice, which I wasn't expecting, and I'm really thankful to be able to be here and hear from all of you. So that's sponsorship in action right there.
Through Brenda and this like was. Good way.
All right, I have one last thing for you, okay, and then we're done. So the last thing is you as an individually, just think on your own. This is personal. Just take about 40 seconds. Think about one thing you can do in the next 3 months that is achievable. And it either is apprenticeship, mentorship, or sponsorship activity. So how can you mentor someone, or sponsor someone? Make sure it's totally achievable. You can do it in next week, or a month, or 2 months. And best if you actually write it down. All you area folks know this practice. Write it down, and you even put in a calendar reminder. I'm going to do X in a apprenticeship, so and put it on the work list, formal X. I'm gonna throw up an IG post. You know, I'm gonna go through my WhatsApp network, and I'm gonna say that I'll go train on this day. I want you to come. So think of that. Put it on your finger. Put it in your notes. Okay. And then when you've done that, just kind of give me a wave.
That's. Oh, motivation.
All right. If you didn't have enough time, you can still think about that and do that on your own time. Just one reminder that, yeah, we touched on inclusion, but the topic is really huge. You know, it's super complex and comprehensive, and I'm no expert, but we just touched on some things that are pretty important to us. If you want to learn more about it, you know, I'm happy to talk more, and I can point you to some resources. And then I just believe leveraging inclusion is a win-win for us, personally as guides and our community, and our clients are going to benefit. And I actually hope that you follow through with that personal action item. Just get it done, and hope we get to witness it, either hearing it through conversations or we see it on the IG. All right, thanks y'all.
Bye.